Welcome to the Who's Left podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from the unapologetic perspective of the Hoosier left. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm recording from Bloomington. Over the course of 50 episodes now, if there is any overarching theme to this project, it is the struggle between plutocracy, government by a wealthy few, and democracy, government by the people. Contrary to the revisionist history you might hear from certain Christian nationalists, the U.S. Constitution was not authored by the Holy Spirit, but by a small number of white, property-owning men, each of whom had their own ideas about how the new nation should be administered and how much government by the people should be allowed, and who even counts as people. The founders argued, haggled, and sometimes fought in the streets over the amount of democracy to be had. The Senate, the Electoral College, the Supreme Court, each serve as a check on the popular will, a choke point at which the ownership class can either assent to or veto democracy. But nothing gets done without stopping at each roadblock. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, the part most people think of as the Constitution, was only added because several states wouldn't ratify the document without it. Amending it further may be more difficult here than in anywhere in the world, requiring passage by 2/3 in both houses of Congress and ratification from 3/4 of state legislatures, completely unimaginable in this day and age, leaving us stuck, beholden to ghosts. Keep drilling down, and you have to take into account that gerrymandered congressional districts and state legislative maps, even the drawing of state lines themselves, have served to corral people inside artificial lines so we may be shepherded more efficiently by the ruling class. For being the world's oldest continuing democratic republic, Americans actually enjoy shockingly little democratic power. This is why, despite overwhelming popular support, we can't enact universal health care, protect women's reproductive freedom, or place sane restrictions on firearms. Deeper still, each state's unique constitution, election rules, and court systems mean citizens in some jurisdictions have more, or for us Hoosiers, less democracy than others. My guest today is seeking the power of elected office specifically for the purpose of giving some of that power directly to the people of Indiana. Victoria Martz is a graduate of Batesville High School, Purdue University, and McKinney School of Law, currently practicing criminal defense as an associate attorney with the law office of Jesse K. Sanchez in Indianapolis. Having served in the Marion County prosecutor's office, she moved to be closer to family in Batesville, where she lives with her partner and their 1.5-year-old daughter. Victoria is running to represent House District 55, which includes all of Fayette, Franklin, and Union counties, and portions of Decatur, Ripley, and Rush counties in the eastern part of the state on the border with Ohio. Now, she'd be a consistent Democratic vote in the Assembly, fighting for a woman's right to choose, standing up for our LGBTQ community, taking on moneyed interests. And in this interview, we will discuss her top priority in the Capitol, protecting our environment, which has been decimated by 20 years of GOP rule at the State House. But we're primarily going to talk about process, lawfare. We'll look at voter suppression, ballot access, campaign finance, term limits, and referendums, tools used by plutocratic Republicans to stymie democracy, and tools the people can use to fight back. Before we turn to that conversation, please consider supporting Who's Left with a financial contribution. I currently work as an independent craftsman during the day and work on this project whenever I can. There are so many more things I want to do here at Who's Left. More campaign finance research, live hangouts if you're interested, a daily episode if we could get there, but I need your help. So if you can, visit scottaaronrogers.substack.com and subscribe at the paid level. For $5 a month, less than a fancy coffee, or only $50 for a whole year. You can help me push our state in a better direction, and maybe if we reach critical mass, I can put down my tool belt and devote my full time to you, to this project, and to Indiana's future. So if you have the means, pause right now, go to scottaaronrogers.substack.com and subscribe at the paid level. And while the best way to help this project is monetarily, if that doesn't work for your budget at this time, you can still help. Subscribe at the free level over on Substack. Set your favorite podcast player to auto-download new episodes of the show. Rate and review the show on whatever platform you use. This helps the algorithm drive new people our way. Follow me on Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at HoosLeft. That's HOOS Left. On Instagram, Threads, and Twitter, I'm at ScottRog78, SCOTTROG78. And on Mastodon at ScottRog78 at Hoosier.social. Please subscribe on whichever platforms you use, and send me a DM to discuss ideas for the project. But most importantly, spread the message. Democracy requires our participation, however much you're capable. Forward the articles to friends, family, and colleagues. Don't just like, but share on social media. Invite others to our little corner of the Indiana left. And I might be the guy with the microphone, but I try to take this thing where your input leads me. So please, be generous with feedback, good or bad. I just want the truth. And to those who have joined the community already, especially those paid subscribers, thank you so much. It's an honor to have your support. And to everybody, thanks for listening. Victoria Martz, welcome to the Who's Left podcast.
Thank you for having me here, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's begin by introducing you to our listeners and viewers here today. Give us the short bio.
Okay, so my name's Victoria Martz. I am a criminal defense attorney currently. I work with a law firm out of Indianapolis. I'm a mother to one child, and she's about 1.5 years old, just the absolute delight of my life. Avid book lover, pet lover, and I want to be a protector of our environment. And I think getting into the state legislature would be an excellent way to accomplish that.
Very good. So, you said you're a defense attorney. Where'd you go to school? How'd you kind of come to be where you are in Indiana? You a lifelong Hoosier?
Not a lifelong Hoosier, but most of my life has been here. So I was actually born in Virginia. We lived there until I was about 4.5, 5 years old. Moved to Michigan. We actually lived in Milan, Michigan for about 2 or 3 years, and then we moved down here to southern Indiana to be closer to my family, my mother's family. And I've lived here ever since I was about 8.5, 9 years old. So we bounced back and forth between Batesville, Indiana and Milan, Indiana. And so I went to law school, to get back to your actual question there. Went to law school in Indianapolis at the McKinney School of Law there. And I lived in Indianapolis until 2022 when I was expecting my first child, and I felt it would be helpful to move closer to family and home so I could be surrounded by my personal community as I raise her as a young mother and a young child. I hear community is excellent, and I have learned by now it is very necessary to raising a
Yes.
child. And now that I'm back here, I just really want to bring my legal expertise to the State House to do everything I can to improve this area and make it a place where we have a strong community and people want to be here.
Tell us about your place there a little bit. What you're in District 55. What's that district look like? What communities are in that area?
Yes, so I am basically on the far west side of that district. So Batesville, Indiana, Sunman, and Morris, those are kind of the western border of District 55. And then we stretch all the way over to the east border of the state. So Liberty, Indiana is in this district. Connorsville, Indiana is in this district. It's basically all of Fayette County, all of Union County, all of Franklin County, and then a small sliver of Ripley, Decatur, and Rush counties. And it's just a beautiful area down here. We've got so many rolling hills and trees. And I was very excited to see the other day when I was driving out to Connorsville. This district includes this Southern Indiana castle on the hill that I've always seen since I was a kid driving around the countryside. And it just delighted me when I saw that that's in my district. I was like, oh man, I get to represent the castle on the hill if I get into office.
Have you visited the castle on the hill yet?
I haven't. I don't know if it's a public castle or if it's a private property. I think it's a private property.
You have to go canvass the castle then.
I need to for sure. True. Just another door to be knocked on.
Right. Well, lower the drawbridge for you.
That would be so great. I would love that.
So it sounds like environmental concerns are one of the major reasons that you are running to represent your district in the state house this year. Is there a certain pressing, I would say, environmental issue in your area specifically that's got you and your potential constituents concerned, or just sort of general, the water quality in Indiana is probably the worst in the country?
Yes. I mean, definitely, I think we need to do more to protect the quality of our water and the quality of our air because, whether or not big money wants to think about it, we are all breathing in the same oxygen. We all have access to the same water at the end of the day, and we should not be poisoning the well. We're just decreasing the prospective length of life for all the members of our community when we do that. And so, a big motivator for me in getting into this position that I'm in, running for office, have you ever heard the name Victoria Spartz before?
Oh, I have. It's. I hope you two don't get confused.
I know. So that's actually, yeah, as a lawyer going around to Hamilton County area and greater Indianapolis area in general, people coming into connection with me would say, oh my gosh, your name is so familiar. Why? I was like, it's because of Victoria Sparks, right? And they're like, oh, yes, ding, 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 that's it. And because of this name association, I've come to be familiar with some of the big issues that she's pushed through the state house and her congressional district. And a big thing for her was repealing the protections on our state's wetlands. So I don't think people think about the fact that our state has wetlands very often, and it's partially probably due to the fact that we've been eroding away the protections of those natural habitats regularly. And I personally love the wetlands. West Lafayette, Indiana, we had a lot of beautiful bog wetlands up there that I would love going hiking around just to explore and see the wildlife. And then up in northeastern Indiana, they have some beautiful wetlands in the Fort Wayne area and all around up there as well. And I've just come to really love these areas. And it was very disheartening to me to hear that Republicans in our state house are trying to diminish the protections on those natural habitats. Um, I'm not a scientist or a botanist, so I don't want anybody to hold me fully to account for this, but my general understanding of wetlands as a layperson is that they offer excellent benefits in filtering water supplies. I mean, just all the roots and the plants that are in them, they do a lot to filter out contaminants in water. They provide a habitat for numerous fish wildlife, amphibian wildlife. They provide habitats for numerous bird wildlife. There's actually a really pretty area. I don't know if it would be considered a wetland or just an area that gets heavy water from time to time over near Salem, Indiana. But whenever I drive out to Salem, Indiana, and I was driving out that way last fall, I passed by this field out there that had just turned into a bog, and there were hundreds of blue herons nesting in this area. And
Oh,
it was
cool.
just so beautiful and cool to see. And I really want to protect these habitats so that we can continue living life the way that you and I have gotten to be familiar with it. I want to pass off to my daughter's generation the same nature that I got to enjoy as a young adult because I just have so many fond memories of exploring nature and enjoying nature. And I believe that it brings great peace and other benefits that we just don't think about to people in society at large.
Yeah. Well, wetlands are not sexy, right? Like, I mean, it's swamp basically, but like you said, they're very very important for natural habitats and filtration, just like like a super important piece of the water process, the water cycle. And yeah, we need those, and they've been whittling away at them in Indianapolis. Any protections, and we need a protector of the wetlands and the environment at the state capitol, because the Republicans been terrible about it.
I know, and it's such a shame. I see it personally from my perspective to this point in time. I have seen it as people are being influenced by the person who's lining their pockets, not by what is
Mm,
best for just for humanity at large. I mean, in general, our global warming situation has gotten to an extreme point. I mean, our polar ice caps are melting at faster rates than have ever been seen before. We are already, I think we're like just about breakneck with the point of no return on those polar ice
yeah.
caps melting and ocean temperatures rising to a irreversible temperature. And I think what people don't think about when they kind of disparage this idea of global warming is that global warming isn't about protecting the planet necessarily. I mean, it is, but it's about preserving human life on the planet.
Hmm.
If the planet keeps warming and we start to see increasing natural disasters like we are now with hurricane frequency increasing, tornado frequency increasing, just severe storms in general, volcanic activity, all sorts of things like this,
Hmm.
is going to keep happening, and the planet will still be here at the end of the day, but humans aren't going to be here at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
well, wait.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important that we preserve these natural habitats because we rely on them whether or not we think about it every day. They they keep the world going. It's not us that keeps the world going. We just get to be here and enjoy it.
Yeah, it's systems, right? Big s- water systems and weather systems and currents and atmosphere. Like there's so much involved that most of us can't even begin to comprehend. But when you mess with one cog in that system, it messes up a lot of things.
Absolutely.
So I was looking through your Ballotpedia survey, which is a great service, by the way, for anybody who wants to know about any candidates in their area, wherever you are, Victoria in District 55, or any candidate anywhere. Um, Go to Ballotpedia. All the candidates have the opportunity to fill out these surveys, kind of tell you where they're coming from. And frankly, if your candidate isn't filling one out, why? I think these are important questions. But one thing I was drawn to on your Ballotpedia page, Victoria, was, and maybe this is the lawyer in you, is you talk about what I kind of label like process issues a lot, and the ways lawmakers have used the law itself as a political weapon, in terms of things like ballot access, keeping people, making it harder for people to vote, and then referendums. Right? It's almost impossible for the citizens of our state to get anything big done because our referendum process is so difficult. So, where would you like to start? Do you want to start with the access to the ballot, voting rights?
Sure. Yes, I think that's a great place to start. And I'll be honest, there are some issues that I know affect ballot access that I'm not necessarily expert on, but I do know just kind of in general what some of these issues are that people run into. So, in my experience so far, it seems like one of the big issues to accessing being able to vote on voting day, and I just know this from personal experience, is that when you are somebody who works in a minimum wage job, it's extremely hard to get off work already, even if it's for a funeral, it's for you just need a day to yourself after weeks of working back to back hours, what have you. So it's just as hard to get a day off to go and vote. Now, something that we don't think about a lot when we talk about voter access to the ballot is what that original intent was in setting voting day on the day that it was set. So I took this class when I was in law school called the Constitutional Convention Seminar. We actually went through James Madison's notes on the Constitutional Convention, and we read about every day, and our professor provided excellent information just from journal entries and letters that were being sent on around the time to help paint a full picture for us as to what was going on. And one of the things that we talked about was how voting day was originally set on November 5th because the intent was we wanted to make sure that the farmers were able to go out and harvest their crops and be able to be there to go vote because it's just such an essential right of the people to have a say in our democracy. We don't say it's a democracy for the people, by the people for no reason. It is
Yeah.
supposed to be. So uh, there's a whole world of things that we could do to improve this. I think one of them would be adding additional measures to make it easier for people to get their vote in that doesn't rely on a set time of day. So having early voting locations is great. I found it to be most effective in the big city area, though, because in Indianapolis, when you do early voting, you could go to a number of locations and they're all pretty accessible. It was like the city county building or a
Hmm.
local building, community building that's near your neighborhood. So it wasn't super hard. But out here in this rural area of District 55, it's way harder to do early voting. We just don't have transportation access like you do in Indianapolis. So when you have an early voting location that's 10 miles or so away from where you live, you're probably not going to be able to go vote early. So, what can we do to fix that out here in these rural areas? I think that we could widen the hours that we have our polling locations open from so that people can really go in any time of day on voting day and make sure that their voice is heard. I think we could even expand voting day to make it more of a 2 or a 3 day thing. But this type of thing is more of a federal issue. At the state level, I'm not going to be able to change the federal voting laws. They're always going to be the same for the federal branch, and they're going to be the ones to decide that. But as a representative at the state house level, I would have access to congressional representatives, senators
Hmm.
from our state that represent us at the federal level. And I could make our voices heard to them and encourage them to pursue measures that are going to widen voter opportunities to go in and submit their votes. So that's a big issue that I see. I don't have any issue with us having to be 18 to vote. I think that's pretty reasonable. Um, I
No,
don't
I've seen they're doing 16 maybe in some European countries, if I understand correctly.
Well, that's not a bad idea either. I mean, I do kind of see a good reason for that as being, we want to teach our kids how to engage with the democratic process while they're in school, and we have the ability to, kind of show them and imitate for them what they need to do and give them practice time before we throw them out to the real world and they have to work full-time jobs to pay their bills and everything. That's not a bad idea. But again, it would have to be for the federal branch. But these are issues that I see, and we need to improve on these. Um, we could even stand to improve on the fact that we require IDs to prove identity when you go to vote. So,
Hmm.
coming from Indianapolis, I am very familiar that we have a large population of unhoused people in our state. Um, I think there's a number of reasons for it. Housing is unaffordable, jobs aren't paying enough. Minimum wage has not changed since I was in high school and I was working minimum wage. And that
Yeah.
was 13 years ago. So that's pretty ridiculous. And I could barely afford to keep gas in my tank when I was working minimum wage, and I was still working 20 to 40 hours a week. So it's pretty abysmal how much people are expected to work and how little they're getting in return for it. But
Absolutely.
identity proof. We need to come up with something that doesn't require a photo ID because not everybody has the ability to get a photo ID. If you're unhoused, you don't have an address to have official mail sent to, which is required to get an ID in the first place. You have to bring in two pieces of mail from official sources, so like your electric bill, your water bill, what have you.
Yeah.
If you're unhoused, you're not going to have that. In fact, a lot of unhoused people, they might not even have their essential identity papers like their social security card or their birth certificate. And you aren't going to be able to get those unless you have an address. So I guess it kind of ties a whole bunch of issues together here. We need to improve our housing situation, and we need to improve the way that we're allowing people to prove their identity at the ballot box so that everybody can access the ballot box, housed or unhoused.
Not just people accessing the ballot, right? And this is super important. Like, everybody deserves to vote. Unhoused people still deserve to vote, right? Like, even if you don't have an address, you're still a person in our country and you deserve to vote. But not just talking about individuals' access to the vote. Candidates' access to the ballot is also an issue you mentioned in your survey as something you were concerned about. Can you tell us about that concern specifically?
Yes, absolutely. So, in order to run for the Democratic or Republican Party, there's a pretty basic requirement there. You have to have voted a straight ballot in the last election cycle. As long as you did that, you can run for the party you voted the straight ballot for. So, okay, I'm going to break this into two parts. First part is this has become an issue, having to vote a straight ballot. So, John Rust, have you heard about John Rust before?
This is the egg farmer who attempted to run against Jim Banks for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate and
Yes.
was denied by the party, correct?
Yes, exactly. And he was denied by the party because he didn't vote a straight ballot, straight ticket in the last election cycle. And I just think that's a terrible rule to have. I mean, it's one that we can all look at on its face and we can say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That
How
seems
would
like
they know?
right. Well, that's a good question. I don't know how they would know except for maybe if he informed them, if he said it in passing, I think that would be a way that they could have known. They might be able to pull your ballot, but I don't think that that's something they can do because I'm pretty
Shouldn't be
sure
able
all our
to.
ballots are confidential. But anyway,
Well,
yeah, it must have been that he revealed it in personal disclosure. But in any
yeah.
case, they prevented him from running for the Republican Party because of it. And I don't think that's a good rule to have because it discourages critical thinking and making informed decisions when we're voting at the ballot box. Anybody can vote a straight ticket. That's super easy. You just hit one button, straight ticket, bing, bang, boom, done. We'll submit it. We've voted. We're done with our job. But that doesn't encourage any level of actually investigating who you're voting for and knowing what they actually stand for and knowing what their records shows. So I think there's a number of reasons why a person may choose to not vote a straight ticket. But I don't think that it should prevent them from being allowed to run for the party that they want to run for. I mean, at the end of the day, people are generally choosing the party that they are choosing to run with because the base issues that that party stands for align most closely with their stances on those issues. So I don't see why who their personal choices were at the ballot box should change who they're allowed to vote for, run for party wise. And
Yeah, it sounds like it ensures conformity. Yeah, and you aren't allowed to disagree with certain issues in your party.
yes, exactly. And that's what we need to encourage in this day and age. There's too much just falling in line with the call to order from the top down.
Mm.
There's a lot of good people out there that are coming across as saying kind of ridiculous things because they just are going to fall in order with the top down system from their party. You can't be like that. You deserve to have your own individual voice heard when you are running for office because that's the voice that you're going to bring to the state house, not the one up at the top. So you should feel free to speak freely as to what your true thoughts and opinions are on the issues that you are telling the people about. So that's part one of the issue. We shouldn't
Yeah.
have this requirement for straight ballot voting. And, part of that being ballots should be confidential. We shouldn't have to disclose what we voted for or didn't vote for in our last election. Okay, then the other half of that being, it's really hard to get on the ballot if you are running as an independent or a libertarian candidate. just because I'm running as a Democratic candidate doesn't mean that I want only Democrats to ever run for office.
Yeah.
I want anybody to run for office that feels the calling for it, because that is somebody that belongs in the office. They felt the call. They're going to do a great job because of that. It's really hard to get on the ticket if you're independent or libertarian, because you have to obtain a requisite number of signatures before you can actually be on the ballot. Way different from running with one of the major political parties, where all you have to do is vote a straight ticket, tell them you want to run with their party, and then do it. So
Yeah. Well, in your case, like you were caucused in, if I understand. So there was no Democratic primary. There were no candidates for the primary in your district, and you were like, well, somebody's got to run. Somebody's got to stick their neck out there and put their name on the ballot. You're like, oh, I guess I'll do it. And so your district party caucuses you in afterwards, which is awesome. That you have that you can still get in there and do that and just have someone on the ballot. And I'm glad we can do that way. But like that's not like you didn't have to collect a bunch of signatures. You just had to collect, convince a handful of delegates that you were the best person for the job, right?
Very true.
It does seem, yeah. So that does seem like an unusual, it's an unfair baked-in advantage for the future parties. Yeah.
Seems like we're almost trying to keep it a two-party system, doesn't it? Isn't that weird? I wonder why.
Well, it's kind of the nature of first past the post voting, and that comes down to state election law. And there's places that are experimenting with this. Like California has, I believe, like jungle primaries. I want to say they maybe do this in another, Washington, maybe. I think they just had a primary the other day, and that's why it's fresh on my mind, where they have the primary election, or in the spring or earlier in the cycle, whatever, and then they just take the top two people, regardless of party, meet in November. So occasionally you can get like two Democrats or two Republicans facing each other in the general, in certain places.
I like that. That's not a bad idea. I mean, it makes sure that we got two candidates running for this one spot that the majority group of the population has voted for in some capacity. But also, I do think that we are benefited by having a representative from each party, and I think we would be increasingly improved by having a representative from the Libertarian and the Independent parties as well on our ballots, because then we're giving the people more options. And we kind of need each other to balance each other out,
Yeah.
Like, I've got very specific beliefs, and Republicans have very specific beliefs. If we were back in the early 2000s when I was a child and we had George H.W. Bush, I believe it was, in office, Republicans were really different back then. I think that we would have been much more moderate people, and those two moderate sides would have done a very good job balancing each other out to bring forth the most effective laws for the people. I can't say that that's necessarily what happened back then. I was a kid. I don't have a great recollection of what was going on other than the big stuff.
Well, I mean, boy, we've been polarizing, I think, generally since about 1980, or, well, certainly the mid 80s and 87. You get the advent of like cable news, and but people don't, I guess, realize as we're swimming in it, like how far right the country's been pushed in the last 40, 50 years. But yeah, that's a whole other thing. One thing I did want to ask you about is we're talking about ballot access for like the libertarians and minor parties. What do you say when, say, you got a close election year like this, right? And you got like a Jill Stein in 2016 or Ralph Nader in 2000, and the amount of votes they got in their respective elections are more than the Democrats lost by in those elections. But you assume that if those folks weren't there, those votes would have been Democratic. And so they play spoiler. So I understand the impulse, I guess, to like want to keep those players out. But what do you think? It sounds like, well, yeah, I get that impulse, but they should still have we should still want them there. Is that how I read it?
Yeah, so honestly, I think the biggest issue in our like state level and our federal level politics right now is that corporations can donate whatever amounts they want to whichever party they want. And most often,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to the Republican or it's going to the Democratic Party. It's not often going to the Independent or Libertarian Party. And I think that plays a big part in which party's getting the most votes. I mean, exposure is everything. If you're getting billions of dollars, I don't know if anybody's got billions, millions and millions of dollars worth of exposure in the campaign cycle, it makes sense why you are one of the major parties to get the most votes at the time of election. Green Party, Libertarian, Independent parties, they just aren't getting that same level of funding from corporations because corporations don't have any interest in it. I mean, like we were talking about before, corporations have clearly shown that they're lining the pockets of whoever's going to decrease limits on their ability to disrupt natural habitats and environments.
Mm-hmm.
So we need more regulations in place on how much an individual is allowed to donate to a campaign as a corporation. I want to say it was Citizens United. As a
Yep.
lawyer, I should remember this better. We went over it very well in law school. It's just been 5 years now, so it's a little bit further at the back of my head now these days. But that's what did away with these limits on how much corporations could donate to a single candidate. And I think we need to put those restrictions into place again. Just because the Supreme Court did away with that restriction doesn't mean that Congress and the Senate cannot do something to fix that problem. They can. They have the full power and ability to. They just need us to be pushing them to do it because they're not going to unless we push them to do it.
Well, wouldn't our current corrupt, rigged Supreme Court say, no, that law you made striking down these campaign limits is unconstitutional? I mean, I think that's kind of what Citizens United basically was, well, you can't put limits on speech. Money is speech. It's free speech.
I think you're right about that. And I think part of it was that they were deciding that corporations were the same as people because they are in our society and so they deserve to have a voice and they are our representation just like an individual human being does. So I think we could work with it here. I think it's going to take a lot of help from the federal branch because I completely agree with you that the Supreme Court is not one that is going to be doing any favors to upholding just laws. They're going to be upholding laws that appeal to just them. And I don't like to see that. I very much support the proposition from President Biden that we implement term limits and that we implement a code of ethics on the Supreme Court. I don't see why we have never had one. I think that's ridiculous.
It's insane.
It's absolutely insane. No wonder women lost their right to their personal autonomy. We didn't have any rules on the people that got to make a decision about that. It's just terrible. But ethics and term limits, I'm all about them. And actually, I think that's the second part of what we're going to talk about.
Well, yeah, actually, because I wanted to ask you about like term limits in general. I'm in favor of term limits, I guess, at the Supreme Court, just in that I don't think lifetime appointments should be a thing where there's no chance to, elect people or have some sort of democratic check on them. But I'm actually not in favor of term limits for elected officials, but I want to hear why you are.
It's so funny you said that because I presented this issue when I was at my caucus as well, and one of the people in attendance was like, "Well, don't you want people with experience in the legislature?" I was like, "Well, yes, yes. I think it's a fine balancing act."
Hmm.
Um, I think if we don't have any term limits at all, we're running into this kind of autocratic issue where one person gets in office, they get reelected a second term, and then at that point they've got so much name recognition, they've got a lot of financial support, they keep getting elected over and over and over again. I think Mitch McConnell is an excellent example of this because he's been in office for most of his adult life and that is obscene. Like, he should not have been in there for longer than, I feel like, 10 years would be the maximum amount of time I think any legislator should be in office for. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be able to take their skills elsewhere and do similar work, but I don't think any one person should be holding on to their individual office for that long of a period of time. Uh, we're all kind of inclined to get blinders and kind of
Yeah.
lose touch with reality a little bit the longer that we are separated from it in that way. So I think term limits would be greatly helpful to maintaining a realistic representation of the voice of the people at the state and legislative levels. So I'm not talking about crazy term limits, not like, you can only serve 2 terms just like the president. I'm thinking more so, I mean, maybe a period of time that's similar to the presidency would be a reasonable term limit. So presidents can only be presidents for 8 years total. So if we did the same rule for legislators, that would give a legislator 4 terms that they could serve before that position, its doors closed on that now. But, just because the doors closed on that one legislative position
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they couldn't still go up. They could go to the state senate, they could go to federal Congress or the federal Senate or any other number of political positions, and their experience would still be highly useful there.
What if they were doing a good job in that position and the people wanted to keep sending them back?
And President Obama was doing a great job in his position. I freaking loved Obama. And I wish I had voted for him. I wasn't great at voting back then. I was working too many minimum wage jobs where I didn't have time to leave work. But he's one that we, the people, I think we all would have voted for him a third time if we could have, because he was doing such a great job and we all loved him so much. But we have to have a rule like this because there's also, on the counterpoint of that, for people that are doing such a great job, we want to elect them again in the face of term limits. There are people that are doing really bad jobs and they're going to keep doing a
Yeah.
really bad job if we don't put term limits in place. So it's a little bit sad, but an end must come to all good things, and doesn't mean that better things are not yet to come still.
Yeah. See, the thing that gets me on the term limits is I think, yeah, like, I think we should have had the opportunity to vote for Obama a third time if we wanted, if if you wanted to keep doing that. FDR won 4 times. The only reason they put those term limits in is because Republicans, like, we cannot have a popular Democratic president keep getting elected all the time. Um, but I don't know if the problem is so much like that people are in office for a long time. It's that they're there without challenge for a long time, and that the election systems themselves are the problems, and the incumbency and the money it involves, and well, then you got the gerrymandering and all that other stuff too. Um, but I think with fair elections, you don't need term limits.
Well, I won't take your opinion from you, as you're fully entitled to it. Oh, man, but I will say, I think term limits are good, and kinda just listening to what you were saying just now, I think they're good because something that I'm seeing a lot in my area right now, just with the Democratic Party in general. So,
Mm,
our area has become very aged compared to what the population distribution was when I was here and I was in high school. So the representatives for the Democratic Party here, they're mostly in their 70s and 60s and 70s and above. I have not seen anybody close to my age in these Democratic meetings. And what I hear a lot at these Democratic meetings is, where are the young people? We need more young people in politics. And I think that that is a benefit that term limits would bring as well. We all have to act as mentors in our society. If we are
Mhm.
not training somebody else to do the job that we're doing, who's going to take it over when we're gone? As much as we'd all love to be immortal, it's not a reality. We're all going to die someday, or be impaired in some way and not be able to keep doing our job anymore. So I think putting term limits on positions like state house, senate, all those other positions
Mhm.
works to that benefit too, just because it motivates the person who's in the office to train the people below them in how to get into this position, how to work the position. And then it makes sure that there's going to be a window of opportunity for those people that they've trained to take over the reins in that position, and then they would be free to go pursue some other position where their expertise will be greatly needed and well used.
Sort of forces you to bring the next generation along with you. I hadn't thought of that angle.
Yeah, and I think it's something we have to be doing more, um, because I think we all want to be the best at what we're doing. Like, I am just the same way. I want to be the best at what I'm doing. It gives us all that kind of sense of, I'm cool. I'm really good at what I do. But I have to understand, someday I'm gonna be not cool. Like, my daughter's gonna be like, "Whoa, that's really not cool, mom." And I need her to be trained to know how to do what I was doing when I was at my prime so that she can do it just as good as I was. And just the same for positions of any array in society, jobs, legislators, any position.
Very, very, very good insight. I did want to ask you one last process thing. We uh, mentioned in passing the referendum process in Indiana, looking at like Missouri, Ohio, Kansas, like conservative places, probably even more conservative than Indiana in the last couple years, have used the power of the people to put their own initiatives on the ballot on election day to do things like protect women's right to an abortion and legalize cannabis and make it harder for corporations to buy their legislators. Indiana can't do that, right? Or it would be exceedingly difficult to do that. What's the process like to put in a constitutional amendment in on the Indiana Constitution right now?
So that is the only thing we have the ability to do as the people in Indiana, and it has to be started at the legislative level. So, in researching this issue, and I'm not going to lie, I don't know what these other states you've mentioned, what their specific deal is. I've just kind of studied in general what the other options are. But here in Indiana, if you want to make an amendment to the state constitution, it must first be brought up at one of the state houses, so either the House or the Senate, and then it has to be approved by a majority vote of both houses for 2 years in a row. So that's one full term for one representative. And then it can go on the ballot if it passes those very restrictive measures first. Um, what they do in other states is they can do a legislative initiative process. So that's kind of what
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing more often with the voting on the legalization of marijuana and things of that nature, is they have this legislative initiative process where there's a rule in their constitution that says, if you gather this percent of the overall state's population in signatures and petitioners, then we will put this question or constitutional amendment or statute that you want passed on the ballot for the people to vote. And then, as long as 2/3 of the people approve it on the ballot that year, it passes. So that's something that I need to see done in Indiana. And if I could do that here, that would truly be a monumental marker. If the state house and Senate could do that, not just me, because it's going to take all people of both houses to do it. Like I said, we're
Mhm.
working with this very restrictive process right now. So, what we have to do first is we have to change our constitution to change that specific part of it where you have to have this very stringent process before you can get an issue on the ballot. We have to amend that to being we are going to say if you can get X amount of the population percentage to sign on and
Mhm.
petition you to put this on the ballot, then we'll put it on the ballot and then it'll pass by majority vote of the people. So it's going to take 2 years to do that. I need to get into office one time to help bring this to the ballot for you all to make this amendment. We're not going to make it about women's rights. We're not going to make it about marijuana. It's purely about amending our ability to let the people access issues on the ballot themselves and approve it by their own personal majority vote. When we're running into this issue where we feel like our state representatives are not carrying our voice to the state house level. So that's something that I've seen done that I really want to see us do in Indiana. And that's going to open the door for a constitutional amendment regarding women's rights to their own personal autonomy. It's going to open the door to legalization of marijuana. And it is absolutely obscene. We are surrounded on all, let's see, one, two, three, four sides by states that have legalized marijuana in some capacity. And
Mhm.
we are fully illegal. And I, as a defense lawyer, I get calls frequently from people passing through Indiana from a state that was legal saying, "Hey, I've just been charged with possession of marijuana. What can I do? I've got a legal marijuana card." And I have to tell them, it doesn't matter because you're in Indiana and it's against the law in Indiana. And I'm really sorry about that. We'll try to work with the system and get you the least impactful on your everyday life outcome possible. But it's just the system we're working with here. And it's fully up to the discretion of the officers and the prosecutors and the courts right now. We need to take
Yeah.
that discretion away from them because obviously they aren't using it. If I was using discretion and I was a police officer and I was surrounded on all four sides by states that have legalized marijuana, I'd probably be like, eh, use your
Yeah.
amount. Okay, you go. Just don't smoke and drive. Oh man. So yeah, we need to fix our referendum process. That's what we're at right now is a referendum. We need to make it a legislative initiative process. And then there also was this really cool thing that I was reading about. I want to pull it directly so I make sure I don't misdescribe it. Oh, my bad. Referendum can mean a few things. So referendum is actually what I'm thinking of here that was this really cool thing that I also read about. So with a referendum, the people can actually recall laws that were passed by the legislature that they did not feel represented what they wanted done. So
Hmm.
I know here in the state of Indiana, most Indiana citizens agree that they were very horrified by the statute that was passed by the House and the Senate immediately following the Dobbs decision that restricted abortion to, is it 8 weeks, 6 weeks? Uh,
I'll say it's 6.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's 6 weeks, no exception for rape, incest, terrible, horrible situations that we all hope we never fall into. But I believe those people deserve to have the right to an abortion if they want it. Everybody's different. Not everybody's gonna want an abortion after something like that happens to them. I will say I personally would. I wouldn't want to live with a memory of the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life every day. And I don't think everybody wants that. I think everybody wants the choice for that. And so I think it's very important that we get something like a legislative initiative in our state and a referendum process so the people can recall statutes like that that are passed, but the majority of us do not agree with.
So sounds like we need to pass a constitutional amendment in order to pass constitutional amendments. We have to convince the legislature uh, to give up a degree of power, right? Good luck with our current Republican supermajority.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. You got to get out and you have to vote blue this fall. Hey, look at that. I didn't even do this on purpose, but it's so true. It's the only way we're going to be able to change that is if we make the House flipped and we get the majority in both the Senate and the House, then we stand a fighting chance with this. So I need everybody to get out and vote this fall do whatever it takes, please, for the love of yourself as much as the love of your neighbor. So yeah, that's kind of something else I discussed on my Ballotpedia page is that I see the fastest route to securing women's right to their own personal autonomy in our state and the fastest route possible is going to be at least 3 years because we got to do the 2 year process to make the constitutional amendment. And then we can get the petitions together, get all the requisite signatures and petitioners together, and put it on the next ballot vote for the next November's election so people can finally vote on making this constitutional amendment. But the biggest issue we got to fix first is the referendum process in Indiana.
Yeah, and that's going to take not a groundswell to turn our state legislature to that point where we can get a majority that would give up that power. And we need everybody, not just in 55, but all over the state. Anybody within distance of my voice, needs to get out there and vote, because you really brought it home. These process things, the fact that we can't put issues on the ballot in our state, the fact that a lot of people have a hard time voting in this state, and the fact that we it's so difficult to get candidates on the ballot in some places. All of this has real world consequences that affects people's day-to-day lives, right? And that's what this is about. This is not just about we're haggling over process. This is really about people's lives.
It absolutely is. And the world isn't doing us any favors right now. It only gets crazier and it gets busier every day that goes by. And I think that is a very intentional point of trying to lead the world into autocratic systems. As long as they keep it busy, they keep it noisy, you can't figure out what issue to focus on first. And so you just give up on all of them. That's a big part of why all that noise is going on. We all have to figure out how to shut off the noise that doesn't relate to what we as an individual can do exactly for our society. So for me, that was kind of a big part of why I'm running for office. I felt very upset, as much as everybody probably does right now, by the genocide that is happening in Gaza right now on the Palestinian people. I mean, not a day goes by that I don't see some horrific act of violence exacted on a small child, a baby, a mother, a woman, a father. It is gut-wrenching. It makes me want to throw up, honestly. And so I was getting kind of caught up in all the noise. I was starting to feel like I don't even know what to do. Like, I've called offices, I've made my voice heard in the ways I think I can. And then I got this email from the Democratic Party and it said, "We're looking for somebody to run for state house in your area. If anybody's interested, reach out to us and let us know." I was like, you know what? I'm a lawyer. I talk to people all day long, every day. This is something I can do. And so I put my name forward for this office position because this is me doing what I can do for society. I can cut off some of my criminal defense work so that I can be there to be the voice for the people of District 55 and carry that voice to the state house level and just shout it as loud as I can for all the world to hear. And every person out there, there is something that is just right for you, and you're going to find it. And honestly, even if it's just the bare minimum of, even if you can't get off work on election day, if they're going to force you to work, walk out of there. I support your right to unionize. Walk out of there. Say, you know what? Upholding my democracy is more important than having this job. And I know that's a really big ask because I know how much you all rely on your incomes to stay alive. But please, we have to do whatever it takes to save our democracy. And if that is the thing that you can do, and that is the whatever it takes for you, get out and do it because democracy needs you. If it's volunteering and going around and knocking on doors with me or another candidate, do that. If it's even just chipping in $5-10 to somebody's campaign, if that's what you can do it. And then stay focused on doing that thing because that's what you can do. Don't let the noise get into your head and make you think, I should just give up on everything. It's all too much. It's never going to change. It is going to change. That's why all the noise is going on. They're trying to distract you from what you can do. So keep your focus on what you can do.
So, Victoria, for those people who can help you do what they can do by perhaps donating or volunteering for your campaign, where could they go about doing that?
That is a great question. So I actually just got an Act Blue account set up today for my campaign where people should be able to go and donate to my campaign. I will say though, so I haven't taken any money into my campaign so far. I'm a $0 candidate. And I kind of like it. Like, I like going out and just talking to people and letting them know me on a by name basis. So if you could come and volunteer with me, that would really be doing the most for me. I don't want to be a candidate that seems like they're about the money. What I'm really about is the people. So I want to connect with all the people I possibly can and then expand that network out by spreading my word to those people. They can spread to their people and go that way. So if you want to volunteer with my campaign, I have an Instagram page. It is Victoria for Indiana House 55. So if you look me up there, shoot me a direct message and say, hey, I want to volunteer with your campaign. And you just tell me what you feel comfortable doing. If you feel comfortable calling people, if you feel comfortable walking around places with me, knocking on doors and talking to people, we'll set you up with what you feel comfortable with. But that's really the number one thing I could use is just volunteers.
And but give her money too. I know, yeah, I know it's hard to ask, especially people's budgets are really tight right now, and it's hard to ask for money, and just unfortunately that's necessary to all the things you need to do to reach people. It's a catch-22, right?
It's true. You're right. Okay. I'll take some money for signs. We'll give you guys signs so you can put them in your yard and tell everybody who you're voting for this fall.
Love it. All right. Well, District 55, get you a big Victoria Martz sign for your yard. And Victoria, thank you so much for joining me here on the HoosLeft podcast tonight.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, Scott. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Anytime. Once again, that was Victoria Martz, defense attorney and candidate for state representative in Indiana's 55th district. So, first of all, I wanted to clarify the law in Indiana regarding ballot access for candidates and their previous voting record. Victoria referred to a requirement for a candidate to have voted straight ticket for one party in the last general election in order to run for that party's nomination in the next primary. It's not exactly the way it works. It's actually worse. In Indiana, we have open primaries. Individuals do not register with the state as a Democrat, Republican, or other. When voting in the May primary, you walk into your polling place and choose either a Democratic or Republican primary ballot. This is how one essentially states their party preference. But what if you're a Republican living by me here in Monroe County? Because the Bloomington area is so liberal, municipal seats often go uncontested by the GOP. Maybe you pull a Democratic ballot to vote for centrists over progressives in local races. Maybe you're a Democrat in a red part of the state, and the opposite is true. Maybe you saw one of those billboards from Recenter Indiana PAC in this year's primary encouraging Democrats to cross over and vote for a moderate Republican, and I use that term incredibly loosely, like Brad Chambers. According to FYI, quote, state law does say that primary voters must have voted in the last general election for a majority of the regular nominees of the political party whose ballot they chose, or intend to do so in the next general election, but there's no way to check that, making it virtually impossible to enforce. End quote. Where John Rust and others in similar situations run into trouble is that in 2022, a new state law took effect that says candidates can only run in the primary as a Republican or Democrat if they voted in that same party's primary in the last two primaries in which they voted. This has had the effect of disqualifying young and first-time candidates, voters who have crossed over for any of those reasons I previously mentioned, and those who have recently moved into the state, all of which protects incumbents from pesky challengers, contributes to party polarization and stifles political engagement by adding more barriers. And that's what it's all about, right? Making true democracy harder. Adding hoops to jump through, hurdles to leap, and walls to climb. At the top, I talked about the anti-democratic obstacles baked in at the federal level. This discussion with Victoria highlights the fact that Hoosiers have had even more roadblocks placed in front of us. Indiana was the first state to introduce voter ID requirements in response to the non-existent problem of voter fraud, and now we have the worst turnout in the country. Still, Republicans in Indianapolis continue making it even harder to vote. So, more difficult to run for office, more difficult to vote in elections, no ballot initiatives, no referendums, no direct democracy, and a nearly impossible to amend state constitution. According to the indispensable Ballotpedia, quote, "The amendment procedures available under the Indiana Constitution are more restrictive than in those of nearly any other state. Only one system is allowed, the legislatively referred constitutional amendment, and this procedure in Indiana is itself more restrictive than in most states, since any proposed amendment must be approved by 2 successive sessions of the Indiana General Assembly before it can go to a vote of the people." Article 16 also does not say anything about how a constitutional convention could be held or called, whereas the constitutions of more than 40 other states do lay out in their constitutions how that process would work in their state. End quote. So, what this means is that even if Hoosiers can sweep Jennifer McCormick into the governor's office and elect a strong crop of new legislators, like Victoria, to the State House, Democrats cannot flip the state Senate this year. Assuming continued Republican intransigence, we cannot even begin the amendment process until at least 2027. Pass an amendment opening the Constitution up to ballot initiatives by the people until 2029, and both will likely take much longer. I say this not to discourage us, not that the Indiana left can get more discouraged than we have been recently, but to rouse all of us to do our part. The mechanisms for change do exist, and if we each, like David Pepper said when I spoke with him recently, incorporate saving democracy into our everyday lives, we can reach that summit. And furthermore, there might be a shortcut. If Americans deliver Kamala Harris to the White House with a cooperative House and Senate, Democrats are promising to pass the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and a host of reforms meant to remove many of those hurdles to democracy: voter suppression, partisan sabotage, gerrymandering, and unlimited dark money. And maybe with those obstacles out of the way, with robust participation in professionally run elections conducted in fairly drawn districts, where policy and principles matter more than fundraising and ad spending, Indiana can have a state government that reflects the real, progressive Hoosier values that we've held all along. Thank you for listening. Thanks again to Victoria Martz. Find her on Instagram at Victoria for Indiana House 55. She might not like asking for money, but I won't hesitate to send you to her Act Blue page. The link is in the show notes. If you're feeling extra generous after you've contributed to her campaign, head on over to scottaaronrogers.substack.com and help support this project with a paid subscription. You'll find everything I publish over there, but you can also find me on Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at HoosLeft, and on most other social media sites at ScottRush78. My DMs are open for feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns. You can also email me at scottrush78@gmail.com. Forward the show to a friend, and have them forward it to another friend. Let's keep building this project and a more democratic Hoosier state. Until next time, this has been the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.